I've gotten my van stuck in the middle of the desert. I was in a really bad rainstorm for a week straight. My van has broken down multiple times, and needless to say, I've had my fair share of unfortunate events. If you're new here, my name's Jessica. I've been living in my van for 6 months, running my jewelry business while also traveling up the West Coast. And here is the story of how I got stuck on top of a mountain for multiple days. Me and my friend Bella have been road tripping together, and we found this specific camp spot in the mountains that we had been at for a while. It was just so perfect. It was on this gravel patch. We had so much space and amazing views. Our days pretty much just consisted of working out, making food, and in the evenings we would watch movies together. It was very calm and a nice reset, but after doing the same thing for a few days, we decided it was time to leave so that we could dump our trash, get water, and restock on food. The next morning, we decided to leave our spot. We had found this coordinates near the town that we were about to go to. It looked like it was kind of on a hill overlooking the town. So we planned to go into town, restock on everything that we needed, and then we were going to go to our camp spot and spend the night. We didn't want to stay there for long because we were kind of in a rush. My sister was actually getting married in about a week and a half in Montana, and I was in the wedding, so we wanted to hit as many places as we could before the wedding. We had a very calm, chill morning, made coffee, cleaned up our stuff. I had to fill my tires with air because we had been sitting there for so long. And then we headed into town, ran our errands, and went to our camp spot. So when we got to our camp spot, it was not what we were expecting at all. It was actually beautiful, way prettier than we thought it would be. But getting there was a lot harder than we anticipated. It was about 4 miles up a very steep gravel road, and we questioned if I should even attempt. My tires weren't very good. I don't have a ton of clearance underneath my van, and I was slipping a lot. We tried anyways, we got to the top, and it was worth it because it was so pretty. Or at least I thought it was worth it until the next day. In the morning, we were getting ready to leave, and I started to pull out of my spot. All of a sudden, I heard my van hit something. I instantly started smelling burning, and the oil light came on. That's when I knew I had put a hole in my oil tray. I don't know a ton about cars, but I do know you should never drive if you don't have oil. We were too far up the mountain to get a tow, and since I couldn't drive it, that also meant I couldn't get it to a shop. So that left me with the only other option I could think of, which was to fix it myself. Thankfully, I was traveling with my friend. She was able to drive me into town, buy the part, and all of the tools I would need to fix my van. Did I know what I was doing? Absolutely not. I've used a jack once. I've never even changed my oil, so this was all very new to me. But thankfully, YouTube is my saving grace, and I found a step-by-step tutorial that looked simple enough. I watched it through a few times, opened my hood, and started to fix it. Honestly, I was cruising when I first started. There were quite a few things I had to take out just to get access to the tray. The battery, an air filter, and a few other things. And then out of nowhere, I started to have an issue. There were a few rusty bolts that I couldn't unscrew. I thought with a little love, maybe they would move, and I started to get some, but there was one specific bolt that would not budge. I worked at it for hours, and I'm not gonna lie, I did cry while doing it. This was indeed not something I was doing for the plot, and I was actually extremely stressed. After a few hours, it started to get dark, and that's when Brenton came along. So Brenton was this kid who drove past me on his dirt bike. He asked me if I needed help, and I'm pretty sure I said no, because sometimes I just like prefer to do things alone and I hate bothering people. Did I need help? Absolutely. And I think Breton could tell that I needed help. 30 minutes later, he came back with his truck filled with tools and he worked on my van for a couple hours. He had electric tools, which made the process way easier, and he was able to get a lot of the rusty bolts out. Unfortunately, there was one specific bolt that neither of us could get out, and we came to the conclusion that I was going to need to take this to a shop. And I felt pretty defeated because even though this looks like it was in one day, it was actually 3 days of me working at this. And after working so hard, the last thing I wanted to do was bring it to a shop and have to pay $1,000. But I felt like I didn't really have a choice. I was in a time crunch. I had to get to my twins' wedding that was in like 5 days, and I still had to drive to Montana, and I was in Washington. So the plan was to coast my van down the mountain in neutral and then hope to get towed from the bottom of the road. But the rock that busted my oil tray was in the way of me rolling down the hill, so I had to move it. This may look like a calm ordeal, but it was actually a very heavy rock and it took me about 3 hours to move. But I finally got it out of the way and went to bed. So the next morning, it was time to get my van off this freaking mountain and get to town because I was so over it. I was covered in dirt. I just wanted to shower. I was super stressed because I needed to get to this wedding. I hadn't worked out. I hadn't been eating. I honestly felt horrible and I was so tired. My van was a mess. Thankfully, I'd been sleeping in my friend's van, but I was just ready for this whole situation to be done and get my van fixed. So I picked up all my tools, tried to undo the bolt one more time, and then we decided to coast down the mountain. Somehow we got down the mountain. It was a whole ordeal. I didn't film it because I was just trying to stay alive, but we made it down safely. And once we got to the bottom, I called all of the mechanics in town, and only one of 9 could help me in the time frame that I needed. But unfortunately, it was way out of my budget. I've never been more determined to fix something more in my whole life. I called my dad. He told me to get some bolt extractors and some PB blaster. And that's what I did. And somehow, by the grace of God, I got the bolt out. And I've never been happier in my whole life. At this point, all I had to do was take the tray out and put the new one in, and then put everything back together. And the rest kind of seemed like it would just be a breeze because I had just taken everything apart. And it kind of was. Like, I ran into a few complications. Like, I lost some of the bolts and I was having a hard time getting the tray in by myself. I was missing a few tools that I needed, but that was nothing compared to what I just went through, so I found a way. I ended up working pretty much all day, listening to Mac Miller and just praying that I actually did it right. The last thing I wanted to happen was to pour the oil in and it be leaking. But as the sun started to set, I finished, I poured the oil in, nothing was leaking. I turned my car on and I could not believe that I actually fixed my van. The feeling was indescribable, to say the least, and I could just not wait to shower and go to bed. The night that I fixed my van, I actually ended up having multiple mice in it. I did end up catching them the next couple days, and once again Bella was a lifesaver and let me stay in her van until I got them out. So much of our time was taken up by all of these endeavors that before we knew it, it was time for us to part ways because I had to get to this wedding. We had been traveling together for almost 3 months. That's a long time, especially considering the fact that we didn't know each other prior to meeting. Looking back, we have so many memories together, and it seemed like our road trip just flew by. We had always planned on parting ways at this point, but it didn't make it any less sad or hard. It was bittersweet because we both had very exciting plans. I was about to go see my family, see my sister get married, and she had a whole bunch of travel plans. So I got up early. I had a very long drive ahead of me. We said our final words to each other, and then it was officially time for us to part ways. So Bella, if you're watching this, I miss you and I hope you're doing well. Soon after, I headed to Montana. On my way, I saw a rainbow. You can't really see it in the video. And before I knew it, I made it to my destination. I finally got to see my family, finally got to sleep in a normal bed, and big changes were about to happen for me, but I'll tell you about that in my next video.